Welcome back, Summit County. Thanks for joining us for a property tax chat with Commissioner Pogue. Tamara, next I kind of want to talk about, you gave us this great overview on the functioning of property taxes, how they're collected. But let's talk about what Summit County puts these taxes toward and what counties statutorily are required to do, what that looks like for us.
So counties are actually called the arm of the state. Essentially, we are the folks that implement anything the state wants to do. So there are some things that we have to do. Law enforcement is the biggest piece of that. So the sheriff's office is their own office, right? The sheriff is elected by the voters, but the county allocates funds to the sheriff every year. Right now, about a third of our general fund goes directly to law enforcement. So that's a big piece right off the top. And we're really fortunate. We have phenomenal law enforcement in Summit County. I mean, obviously, all of the work that the sheriff has done with our SMART co-responder team, some of the work that we've done with pretrial services to keep folks out of the jail, because we know the jail is one of the most expensive places we can send folks. Certainly making sure that we have enough deputies to respond in appropriate timeliness. 911, that is another responsibility of the county. That is another thing that we fund with a mill. The coroner's office, right? The district attorney's office. All of these pieces are things that the county has to provide money for. Roads and bridges are the next biggest pieces, right? So we live in a high alpine environment, which means asphalt doesn't last as long. So per mile, we end up paying more to maintain our roads than you might find in Denver, for example. So that's the next biggest piece. After that, there's a lot of very small pieces, right, after those. So human services is one of those. We actually just received an award from the state for excellence and speediness and timeliness and accuracy with which we engage folks, with which we can process folks' applications. And to many people that doesn't sound very important, but if you are someone, for example, who relies on child support, having the county there to enforce child support orders, having the county there to make sure that you get paid in a timely fashion, that's really important. Similarly, a lot of folks in our community use Medicaid as their health insurance. And so that enrollment is another piece of what the county does. We also run the senior center, right? Folks love the senior center, and we do provide a lot of navigation for seniors. That is also something that is funded out of the general fund. Youth and family services, right? So many first-time parents go to our new moms and dads groups. That's another thing that's funded out of our general fund and has also received a lot of recognition as a quality program. So then there's some of the things I think that are, that folks don't see as much, but planning and zoning is another big example of that, right? So anytime you want to, do an addition to your property, we have to make sure that you're doing so in a way that complies with the rest of your neighborhood. That's planning and zoning, really. So that is also a piece. And some of it is really nebulous, like the state requires us to do weed mitigation. We've actually received a lot of awards for our weed mitigation programs. They're one of the best in the state. And so we pay for that out of the general fund. So lots and lots of things like that may not always be present, but when you make a call because you think you don't have a stop sign or the Summit stage isn't picking up, those are all county functions and all county services. There are a lot of services that the voters have approved and they want us to do. The stage is a great example of that, right? And moving from 60-minute service to 30-minute service, I received a lot of outreach from the community about that. But to do that, we had to have more bus drivers and more buses, and that obviously costs money, right? That's a very tangible way that we chose to use some of the extra tax dollars that we received this year. We also, open space, right, is another one where there's a voter-approved mill, and we've really tried to preserve and protect as much land as we can in Summit County. We've tried to keep development out of the backcountry, and we've used those funds to do that. Behavioral health. We have been very fortunate that we've been able to bring a lot of really groundbreaking programs to our community, particularly for youth. The fact that we have a therapist in every school in Summit County, that is due to property taxes, right? So that's another example. Childcare, right? The fact that we have universal childcare for 4-year-olds and now 3-year-olds in Summit County, again, that's another example of what we do with mill levy. And then, of course, there's housing, right? we collect about $7 million in dedicated funds for housing. And I was thinking to myself, the U.S. Forest Service project that will bring 170 rentals to Summit County, that's an $80 million project, right? So, that's another example of the funds that we have while feeling and contributing to folks' affordability. We are pinching every penny to try and do as much as we can for folks to make it livable in Summit County in other ways. Many things that counties do. Again, great website you can look at if you want more detail.
One of the things that I love about this county is that focus on its people, and especially early childhood intervention and pretrial intervention, these kind of things that lead to an overall savings when you start early.
That's right.
Can you tell us a little bit more about, I know there's some talk about the school district and how that's funded, and speaking about all of this early childhood work, could you tell us a little bit about the difference between school district funding and county funding?
Yeah, so the school board is responsible for passing the school district's budget. Commissioners don't have any authority over that. And the school board, there is very little in Colorado that is more complicated than how we fund our schools. And on a per pupil dollar amount, Colorado also sits at the bottom of the list, right? I don't know if it's actually the bottom or if it's just close to the bottom, but we spend less per child on education in Colorado than most of the other states in the nation. And that's a direct relationship to the fact that our residential assessment rate is one of the lowest in the nation, right? But essentially, the way school funding works is the state contributes some, and the local school district contributes some. And in places with high property values like Summit County, we contribute a lot more per pupil of local funding, and then the state gives us a lot less. And so it's supposed to even out, doesn't really even out at the end of the day. But that is essentially how it works. And that is also why, when folks think about this large property value increase, the natural inclination is to say, well, the school district and the county must be getting much more money. But in fact, the school district didn't, because it just means they have to increase their local share and they get less from the state as a result. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Always clear as mud. But
Yeah.
This is why we need to have these conversations so folks can understand, and so all of us, myself included, can better understand where our dollars are going. Commissioner Pogue, you've been our longest tenured commissioner on this board. What programming are you most proud of that's come as a result either of a mill or some of these property taxes?
Yeah, certainly the work we've done in housing, we are, I think, nationally recognized as leading, and there is so much work to be done, but we've launched the Larkspur. We are now building Nellie's Neighborhood. We have converted 2 hotels. We have continued to make large investments in buy-downs where the county buys a property and then resells it at a lower cost. So a lot of the work in housing that we've done, I'm incredibly proud of. This board in particular has really tried to focus on the basics. And so while we have a long way to go in getting our roads up to where they should be, we have made some significant investments in road improvements that I'm very proud of. Certainly the work that we do in behavioral health and access to early childhood education is another place in which Summit County has really been recognized for outstanding work, and certainly very proud of the fact that we do now have a therapist in every school. We do have medication-assisted treatment for those that are suffering from substance use disorder. We have a medical detox that is consistently running. And then I would say the other thing I'm really proud of is when I started as a commissioner, the county was only 50% staffed. We couldn't answer 911. We couldn't keep the landfill open consistently. And now we are at 95% staffed. And that certainly is in large part due to the investment that our taxpayers made with that large increase. But it is also because we chose to use a lot of that money to reinvest in our staff. And it has meant we have been able to fill positions. And so there are some very concrete ways in which I think the public can feel that. Certainly the fact that we have more deputies available to respond when there's a crime. Certainly the fact that we now have what I consider a good 911 response rate where we didn't at the beginning of my tenure. Certainly the fact that we can keep places like the senior center and the landfill open for folks that want to use those facilities. There's a lot of, I think if you stop, as you're driving around Summit County and you look at housing or you look at Even our medical facilities, many of those projects are funded by property taxes. And I think we have a lot to be proud of as a community.
Awesome. Thank you for summing that up. So you've heard it. Check out the 2 websites that we'll post in the description of this video where you can learn more about the county budget process and also property taxes and where your dollars are going. Thanks for joining us on County Connections. Make sure you raise your voice and let your elected officials know what's important to you. I'm Adrienne with Summit County Government. See you next time.